You know what's strange? A lot of people don't feel poor anymore. They feel trapped. And those are not the same thing. Poor feels temporary. Trapped feels permanent. Poor says, I don't have enough yet. Trapped says, if this stops, my entire life shakes. That's a completely different emotion. And the strange part is, many people only discover this after life starts looking successful. You finally start earning more money, maybe more than your parents ever made. You move into the nicer apartment because you earned it. You upgrade the car because life feels exhausting, and you want some proof the stress is worth something. You start paying for convenience because energy is low and time feels permanently scarce, and slowly, almost invisibly, your life becomes expensive to maintain, not luxurious, dependent. Now the paycheck doesn't feel exciting anymore, it feels necessary. And that's the moment many intelligent people accidentally stop building freedom and start protecting survival in a more comfortable-looking form. Robert Kiyosaki believed this is exactly how people get trapped in what he called the rat race, not because they're lazy, not because they're stupid, because their obligations quietly grow faster than their freedom. And the uncomfortable part is, the people most trapped by money often don't look financially unsuccessful from the outside. They look responsible, ambitious, sometimes even impressive. That's what makes the trap difficult to recognize while you're inside it. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides, I want to build a life that permanently depends on constant performance. It happens gradually. A bigger payment here, a subscription there, a small lifestyle upgrade after every raise. And one day you realize something unsettling. Your income hasn't created peace. It has created maintenance. A lot of people listening already know this feeling. You check your banking app late at night even when your salary is objectively good. You feel temporary relief on payday, but not actual security. You look successful in photos, while privately calculating how long you could survive if your income suddenly stopped. And maybe the most exhausting part is this: you're technically doing well, which means you don't even feel allowed to feel anxious, so instead you quietly carry it. You answer emails during dinner. You check Slack before your eyes fully open. You feel guilty relaxing on weekends because your nervous system became addicted to productivity. And eventually, a question starts forming underneath everything. If I'm doing everything right, why does this still feel fragile? That question sits underneath modern adulthood more than people admit. You see it in people refreshing LinkedIn while pretending they're just networking. You see it in high performers panicking during restructuring announcements. You see it in people buying expensive things not because they deeply want them, but because they need visible proof the stress is leading somewhere. And maybe the saddest part is this: a lot of adults don't actually want luxury, they want relief. Relief from pressure, relief from uncertainty, relief from feeling behind. Relief from the fear that one disruption could destabilize everything. Kiyosaki believed many people respond to that fear by chasing higher income, while never learning how money actually behaves. And that distinction changes the entire book, because Rich Dad Poor Dad is not simply saying, make more money. It's asking something much deeper. What kind of life are you building, and what is that life requiring from you in return? That's why this book resonated so strongly when it exploded in popularity in the late 1990s. Most people were taught a familiar formula: go to school, get good grades, find stable work, climb carefully, retire someday. Kiyosaki looked at that path and asked a dangerous question. What if hard work alone doesn't create freedom? Not because hard work is bad, because hard work without financial literacy can still leave people dependent. And Kiyosaki dramatizes this through the two father figures at the center of the book. His poor dad was educated, responsible, respected, and professionally successful. But according to Kiyosaki, he still struggled financially because he believed security came primarily from employment. The rich dad, his friend's entrepreneurial father, viewed money differently. Not emotionally, strategically. He believed ownership mattered more than salary, assets mattered more than appearances, financial education mattered more than traditional academic success. And honestly, that contrast is probably why the book became unforgettable, because millions of people recognize those two voices inside their own lives: the safe voice and the freedom-seeking voice. The voice that says, protect what you have, and the voice that quietly asks, what if there's another way to live? One of the smartest things Kiyosaki did in this book was turn financial ideas into emotionally visual situations. For example, he describes the rat race through ordinary middle-class life. A couple gets a raise, so they buy a bigger home. Then come new furniture payments, credit cards, car upgrades. More expenses, children, more obligations, and suddenly the higher income that was supposed to create freedom creates dependency instead. That example stayed with people because it felt familiar. Not dramatic, familiar, and honestly, a lot of modern adulthood still works exactly like that. People don't notice their raise disappeared until they realize their survival now depends on maintaining a more expensive life. That line hits because people can feel it physically. The nicer apartment, The endless subscriptions, the delivery apps after exhausting workdays, the expensive commute supporting the job that pays for the commute. Individually, none of these things seem catastrophic. Together, they quietly narrow your options. And Kiyosaki's argument was not, never enjoy your money. That's an oversimplification many critics unfairly project onto the book. His point was more directional. He believed financially independent people often prioritize acquiring cash flow producing assets before aggressively expanding lifestyle expenses. That distinction matters, because this is where the famous asset versus liability idea enters the story. Now, to be fair, Kiyosaki's definitions here are intentionally simplified and controversial. Traditional accounting definitions are more nuanced. Critics have debated his framing for years, but emotionally, the simplicity is exactly why the idea spread so widely. Kiyosaki defines an asset primarily by cash flow direction. If something consistently puts money into your pocket, he considers it an asset. If it consistently takes money out, he considers it more like a liability. Simple, memorable, and psychologically disruptive, because suddenly people start reevaluating their lives differently. Not, does this look valuable, but does this increase freedom or increase dependence? That's a terrifyingly useful question. And it changes how you see adulthood, especially modern adulthood. Because modern culture constantly encourages people to build identities around visible success, the better apartment, the aesthetic lifestyle, the image of productivity, the appearance of having it together. But appearances can hide enormous fragility. A lot of people don't hate their jobs. They hate knowing they can't afford to lose them. That's different. And once you feel that emotionally, you start understanding what Kiyosaki was really pointing toward. Dependency. Not poverty. Dependency. That's the word underneath this entire book. Dependency on paychecks, dependency on employers, dependency on lifestyles requiring constant maintenance, dependency on endless momentum. And the dangerous thing about dependency is that it slowly normalizes itself. At first you think, I just need to grind for a few years. Then the years pass, then the obligations grow, then the energy shrinks. Then your lifestyle becomes too expensive to interrupt. And eventually the freedom you thought you were building keeps moving further away. That realization hits especially hard in your 30s and 40s. Because that's when many people start noticing something uncomfortable. They became very good at functioning without becoming genuinely free. And this is where Rich Dad Poor Dad becomes more than a finance book. It becomes a book about emotional conditioning. Here's what most people take from the book. Buy assets. Avoid liabilities. That's the visible lesson. But here's what many people miss. The deeper emotional layer is about fear. Fear of instability, fear of uncertainty, fear of looking irresponsible, fear of stepping outside socially approved definitions of success. Kiyosaki repeatedly describes how fear and desire trap people inside financial cycles. Fear pushes people to chase security, then desire pushes them to expand lifestyle. Then those new obligations create more fear, and the cycle repeats. That's why the rat race metaphor emotionally worked, because many people recognize themselves inside it immediately. And honestly, modern life makes this cycle even more intense. You can feel it in moments people rarely discuss honestly. The Sunday evening anxiety. The strange emptiness after buying something you thought would finally make you feel accomplished. The exhaustion vacations don't fully fix. The realization that adulthood slowly became maintaining things you barely have time to enjoy. That line hurts because it feels true for a lot of people. But one reason this book inspired so many readers is that it didn't just diagnose the problem. It suggested another possibility. Kiyosaki believed wealth was learnable, not magical. Not reserved for geniuses, learnable. That's why he constantly emphasized financial education. Learning investing, learning sales, learning communication, learning how money moves, learning how businesses function. He even worked at Xerox partly to improve his sales ability before pursuing entrepreneurship. That detail matters because it grounds the philosophy in actual behavior, not fantasy. Kiyosaki was not telling readers, quit your job tomorrow. That's another common misunderstanding. His broader point was to slowly build assets, skills, and financial intelligence so your entire future does not permanently depend on earned income alone. That feels much more realistic and much more human, because most people cannot instantly escape financial responsibility, nor should they recklessly try. Even Kiyosaki's ideas have been heavily debated over the years, especially regarding risk, real estate, and the accuracy of certain stories. But the emotional truth many readers connected with remains powerful. A high salary alone does not automatically create freedom. And once that realization lands, you start asking different questions. Not, how do I look successful? But what would make my life less fragile? That's a completely different mindset. Maybe it means reducing unnecessary obligations. Maybe it means learning investing slowly and responsibly. Maybe it means building ownership over time. Maybe it means creating multiple income streams gradually. Maybe it simply means becoming more conscious about the relationship between lifestyle and freedom. Because every financial decision quietly shapes more than your bank account. It shapes your future emotional reality, your stress levels, your flexibility, your ability to pause, your relationship with time itself. And eventually the book arrives at its deepest idea, the one that reframes everything before it. Kiyosaki asks readers to define wealth differently. Not as salary, not as status, not as possessions, but as time. How long could you continue living if you stopped working today? That question lands differently as you get older. Because eventually many people realize something heartbreaking. A lot of modern success is rented, not owned. It continues only while performance continues. And for many ambitious professionals, that realization creates grief. Not because they failed. Because nobody taught them another framework. They were taught how to become employable, not how to become financially independent thinkers. And maybe that's why Rich Dad Poor Dad still matters decades later. Not because every financial claim inside it is perfect. Not because every anecdote should be treated as literal financial instruction. But because, emotionally, millions of people recognize themselves inside the tension it described. The tension between income and freedom, appearance and security, success and dependence. And maybe the most important shift this book creates is simple. You stop asking, how can I earn more, and start asking, what kind of life am I quietly building? Because a lot of people spend their healthiest years building a life they become too exhausted to fully live. And Kiyosaki's deeper question was never just about becoming rich. It was about whether money was buying back your freedom, or slowly consuming more of your life to maintain itself. That's why the book lingers. Not because it gives perfect answers, because it forces uncomfortable reflection. The reflection that maybe adulthood is not supposed to feel like permanent maintenance. Maybe financial success is not just surviving a more expensive lifestyle. Maybe real wealth has something to do with optionality, breathing room, time, the ability to make decisions without fear constantly standing behind them. And maybe the most dangerous thing isn't being poor. Maybe it's spending decades building a life that looks successful, while quietly becoming too fragile to step away from. That's the question Rich Dad Poor Dad leaves behind. Not, how much money do you make, but, if your current life disappeared tomorrow, would your money still know how to work without you?